The planet Elyra was known across the Outer Rim as a quiet miracle. It circled a pale blue star at the very edge of explored space, far from the trade empires, war zones, and political centers of the galaxy. Most star maps barely marked it. To the great powers, Elyra was unimportant. To its people, it was everything. The Elyrans were gentle beings with silver eyes and soft voices. They were not conquerors. They had never built warships. They had never needed armies. Their cities were carved from white stone that gleamed in the sunlight, with towers of crystal glass rising above fields of gold grain and rivers so clear you could see the smooth blue rocks beneath the water. Music drifted through their streets every evening. Children raced through gardens of glowing flowers. Teachers held lessons under open skies. Artists painted stories on long walls beside the canals. Farmers laughed while harvesting fruit from trees older than many empires. For thousands of years, Elyra had lived by one belief. If you give peace, peace returns. And for a long time, it seemed true. Even when traders from rougher worlds visited, they often left calmer than they arrived. Elyra had a strange effect on people. Angry voices softened there. Tired hearts rested there. Many said the planet felt less like a world and more like home. Among the younger generation was a girl named Senna. She was small, curious, and forever taking machines apart just to see how they worked. While others painted or farmed, Senna spent her days in a little workshop beside her family's orchard, building radios, signal drones, and tiny solar engines from scrap parts bought from passing merchants. Her father joked that one day she would accidentally rebuild the moon. That morning, she was repairing an old receiver while the warm wind moved through the fruit trees outside. Her mother sang nearby while sorting baskets for market. In the distance, temple bells rang noon across the capital valley. It was an ordinary day. The kind of day nobody remembers until it becomes the last one. Senna adjusted a wire, frowned at the static, and tapped the side of the radio. Nothing. She sighed. Then the sunlight dimmed. At first, she thought a cloud had crossed overhead. But the shadows grew too fast. Birds exploded from the trees in panicked swarms. The singing stopped. The bells in the valley cut off mid-note. Senna stepped outside. The orchard was dark. Not night dark. Covered dark. She looked up. Something enormous blocked the sky. Her breath caught. Above the valley hung a shape so massive it seemed impossible, an angular black vessel stretching from horizon to horizon, its underside covered in red lights like burning eyes. It moved without sound, gliding through the clouds as if the heavens themselves had gone rotten. More shadows appeared behind it. Her mother dropped a basket. Fruit rolled through the dirt. "What is that?" she whispered. No one answered. Across the valley, alarms began to scream. People poured into roads and fields, staring upward in disbelief. Some pointed. Some prayed. Some simply stood frozen, unable to understand what they were seeing. Then the first beam fell. A line of green fire struck the distant city towers. Crystal exploded. White stone shattered. The capital of Elyra vanished in a bloom of smoke. The shockwave hit seconds later. Windows burst inward. Trees bent hard enough to crack. Senna was thrown to the ground as the world roared around her. When she looked up again, black ships were descending through the smoke. Hundreds of them. The peace of Elyra ended in a single afternoon. The first ships landed in the grain fields outside the capital. They came down hard, crushing crops, tearing irrigation lines apart, and sinking metal claws deep into the earth. The golden farms that had fed Elyra for generations were flattened in minutes beneath engines hot enough to turn soil into black glass. Their ramps lowered. And the monsters walked out. They were called the Dravok. Even in the Outer Rim, the name was spoken quietly. Stories said they had no homeworld because they had stripped it bare centuries ago. Stories said they moved from system to system like locusts, taking metals, food, labor, water, and lives until nothing remained but ash and empty cities. Most believed those stories were exaggerated. They were wrong. The Dravok were tall, broad creatures wrapped in dark armor made from lead plates of jagged metal. Their helmets had narrow glowing slits where eyes should be. Their hands ended in clawed gauntlets built for tearing through doors, or people. They did not march like soldiers. They spread like disease. Some fired into the air to scatter crowds. Others smashed doors open and dragged families into the streets. Storage halls were marked for looting. Hospitals were seized. Water stations were occupied. Communication towers were blasted apart before any organized warning could spread. Wherever resistance appeared, it lasted seconds. The Elyrans had no military. Their city guards carried stun batons and ceremonial shields meant for crowd control during festivals, not war. Brave men and women tried anyway. They stood in narrow streets and begged civilians to run while they formed trembling lines. The Dravok laughed as they charged them. Metal met flesh. The guards were thrown aside like toys. Senna and her mother fled through smoke-choked roads with thousands of others. Around them, people screamed names into the chaos, searching for lost children, parents, friends. A teacher from her district tried to guide a group of students toward the river tunnels. A Dravok transport crushed him under its landing struts without slowing down. Senna nearly stopped. Her mother yanked her forward. Run. They reached a market square where statues had stood that morning. Now those statues lay broken across the stones. At the center of the square stood one of the invaders, larger than the rest. His armor was blacker, his shoulder plates lined with bone trophies from races Senna did not recognize. He held a translator device in one hand. The machine crackled, then spoke in broken Elyran. Citizens of this world, it growled. You now belong to the Dravok Dominion. People stared in horror. He continued. All food, metals, fuel, and labor are now property of the Dominion. Resistance will be corrected. Productivity will be rewarded. Waste will be removed. A child cried somewhere in the crowd. The commander turned his helmet toward the sound. Then casually fired. The blast struck a wall beside the child, showering stone everywhere. People screamed and dropped to their knees. He laughed. The sound was low and ugly. My name is Warlord Krass, the translator said. Learn it quickly. Behind him, more smoke rose from the capital. The white towers of Elyra were falling one by one. By nightfall, the city glowed red. The Dravok patrols moved through neighborhoods dragging survivors into holding zones. Families were separated. Skilled workers were tagged for labor. The old and wounded were shoved aside as worthless. Senna and her mother hid beneath a collapsed bakery with 6 others, listening to boots thunder overhead. Every few minutes came another explosion. Every few minutes came another scream. Senna pressed both hands over her ears. This can't be happening, she whispered. But above them, the invaders planted their banners over the city. And in the dark, the Dravok began counting everything Elyra had left to steal. While Elyra burned, the Galactic Council was having dinner. Their capital world, Orion Prime, was a place of polished towers, floating gardens, and endless artificial sunlight. No smoke darkened its skies. No screams echoed through its streets. War existed there only as a topic for speeches and carefully managed reports. Inside the Hall of Concord, the most powerful leaders in known space sat around a circular table of gold crystal and watched Elyra die on a screen. Satellite images showed burning cities. Columns of refugees. Dravok ships landing by the hundreds. A blinking distress signal repeated in the corner of the display. Emergency request for intervention. Immediate aid required. Civilian collapse imminent. No one moved. High Chancellor Elyran, ruler of 7 wealthy systems, folded all 4 of his hands calmly. The Dravok fleet numbers are significant, he said. Direct engagement would be costly. A winged delegate from the trade worlds nodded. Our shipping lanes are already strained. Diverting defense groups would damage quarterly recovery. Another leader adjusted jeweled robes. Elyra contributes little to interstellar production. One by one, excuses filled the chamber. Too far. Too expensive. Too risky. Too small. On the screen, another district of the capital vanished in fire. Council Marshal Turin, an older representative from a frontier colony, stood abruptly. There are millions of civilians down there, he said. They trusted our charter. They are members under council protection. Elyran did not even look at him. Protection is conditional on strategic practicality. Turin's voice hardened. So our laws mean nothing when danger appears. Our laws, Elyran replied, must survive to protect the greater whole. The chamber murmured approval. Turin stared around the table in disbelief. These are farmers. Teachers. Children. A cold silence followed. Then Elyran tapped the table. It is one small world. Those words settled like poison. Several delegates looked relieved to hear them spoken aloud. A vote was called. Intervention fleet deployment, denied. Emergency humanitarian convoy, denied. Sanctions against the Dravok, delayed for review. The screen continued showing burning streets while signatures were logged. Turin removed his council insignia and placed it on the table. You are not preserving peace, he said quietly. You are teaching the galaxy that promises from powerful people are worthless. No one answered. He turned and walked out. Behind him, servants entered carrying the next course. Far away on Elyra, hidden beneath broken stone, Senna finally managed to restore power to her damaged receiver. The little machine flickered weakly in the dark. She tuned through static until she found the emergency channel. A recorded council response played. Your request has been received. Due to current strategic limitations, assistance is unavailable at this time. Maintain order and await future review. Her mother covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. One of the people hiding nearby whispered, "They abandoned us." Senna listened again, hoping she had heard wrong. Same message. Same calm voice. Same betrayal. Above them, Dravok engines roared through the streets. The council had fleets large enough to defend 100 worlds. But for Elyra, they had chosen comfort. Senna looked at the broken radio in her hands. Then at the frightened faces around her. If the powerful would not help them, someone else had to hear. The bakery ruins were colder after midnight. Dust drifted from cracked beams each time heavy vehicles passed above. Somewhere nearby, metal doors were being torn from hinges. Somewhere farther away, another building collapsed with a thunderous groan. No one in the cellar slept. They sat in darkness, listening. Senna knelt beside her little receiver with a toolbox spread around her knees. The casing was cracked. 2 circuits were burned out. The antenna had snapped clean in half during the first bombardment. Normally, it would have been junk. Tonight, it was everything. Her mother touched her shoulder gently. You should rest. Senna shook her head. If I stop, we disappear. She stripped copper wire from an old lamp, rewired the power feed, then connected the antenna to a steel baking tray for signal boost. Sparks jumped. The machine coughed static. A man nearby whispered, "The council already answered." They refused, Senna said. Yes. Then I'm not calling them. The others looked up. One elderly teacher leaned closer. Who else is there? Senna stared at the stars she could not see through the broken ceiling. I don't know. She turned the dial. Static. Another dial. Static. She kept searching frequencies meant for traders, miners, smugglers, cargo escorts, anyone who might be listening. Above them came shouting in harsh Dravok voices. A child in the cellar began crying softly. Senna increased the gain until the speaker whined. Then she pressed transmit. This is Elyra emergency channel, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Civilian population under invasion. Cities fallen. We need evacuation, medicine, anything. Please respond. Only static answered. She tried again. This is Elyra emergency channel. If anyone can hear this, please help us. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Battery levels dropped. The people in hiding slowly returned to silence, their brief hope fading into exhaustion. Her mother wrapped a blanket around 2 children asleep in the corner. You did what you could, she said softly. Senna's eyes burned. No. Not yet. She changed frequencies again. This is Senna of Elyra, she whispered now, too tired to sound formal. I don't know who I'm talking to. Maybe no one. But my people are dying. The council left us. If there is anyone out there who still remembers what mercy is. Her voice broke. She swallowed hard and continued. Please. She released the button. Nothing. The cellar seemed to sink into hopeless quiet. Then the receiver clicked. Everyone froze. A burst of clean static cut through the room, different from the dead hiss of empty channels. Sharper. Stronger. Senna grabbed the radio. Another click. Then a voice came through. Deep. Calm. Human. Unidentified civilian transmitter, this is Terran Unified Command. Nobody in the cellar moved. Senna's breath stopped. The voice continued. We hear you, Elyra. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She pressed the button with shaking fingers. Who are you? A pause. Then. Friends. The room erupted into stunned whispers. Senna could barely speak. Can you help us? The answer came without hesitation. Hold your position. A second voice in the background barked orders. Metal alarms sounded faintly over the channel. Then the first speaker returned. We are coming. The transmission ended. For a heartbeat, no one said anything. Then Senna's mother began to cry openly. The old teacher sat down hard against the wall, laughing in disbelief. A child asked, Who are Terrans? No one knew. Above them, Dravok patrols still owned the streets. Across the stars, the council still sat behind golden walls. But somewhere in the darkness between worlds, someone had answered. And they were already moving. The name Terran meant nothing on Elyra. No race by that title held a seat on the council. No Terran fleets patrolled trade lanes. No Terran ambassadors attended the great summits. In school maps, if the name appeared at all, it was only beside a tiny yellow star system on the far edge of civilized space. Small. Remote. Unimportant. That was all anyone knew. In the ruined streets above the cellar, however, one being did recognize the signal. Warlord Kras stood inside the shattered planetary communications tower, watching technicians strip valuable components from the walls. His command translator suddenly chirped with intercepted traffic. One of his officers turned. Unknown transmission traced from civilian district. Kras took the device. He replayed the final line. "We are coming." The warlord's shoulders shook. Then he laughed. A deep, brutal laugh that echoed through the broken tower. "Terrans," he snarled. "The Mudworld scavengers?" His officers joined in. Every raider in the outer systems had heard of humanity, barely. Traders with rough manners. Miners who fought too hard over rocks. Engineers obsessed with ugly practical machines. A species too busy arguing among themselves to matter politically. They owned no grand empire. They commanded no tribute worlds. They were beneath notice. Kras opened a fleet-wide channel. "All units listen," he said. "The little Terrans claim they are coming to save this planet." Laughter crackled through hundreds of helmets. "Prepare a welcome." More laughter. "We will melt their ships for scrap and feed their bones to the furnaces." Cheers followed. Orders spread immediately. Anti-orbital cannons were repositioned. Interceptor wings launched. Ground troops intensified sweeps to flush out survivors before any outsiders could organize resistance. Kras wanted the rescue attempt visible. He wanted the people of Elyra to watch hope die. Below ground, Senna heard the engines overhead increase. The Dravok were moving faster now. She clutched the receiver. Will they really come? Her mother squeezed her hand. They answered. That doesn't mean they can win. No one in the cellar said otherwise. Because no one there had forgotten the size of the invasion fleet. No one had seen anything stronger than the Dravok. No one could imagine a force that would willingly charge into this nightmare for strangers. Hours passed. Dawn should have come, but smoke covered the horizon. Then the air changed. At first it was subtle, a low vibration through the floor stones. Dust trembled from ceiling cracks. Loose tools rattled. Outside, sirens began screaming across the city. Different sirens this time. Not civilian alarms. Military alarms. Senna crawled toward a narrow fracture in the wall and peered outside. Dravok soldiers were looking upward. Not shouting. Not laughing. Staring. The clouds above Elyra twisted inward as if the sky itself were being pulled open. A circle of blue-white light formed high over the capital, widening second by second. Lightning arced around its edges. Every sensor in the Dravok fleet began to howl. On Kras's flagship, officers shouted over one another. Massive energy spike. Drive signature unknown. Reading count impossible. Kras slammed a clawed fist onto the command rail. Show me. The main screen turned to orbit. Then his confidence died. The tear in space widened. And something vast began to emerge. Not one ship. An armada. Steel-gray hulls poured through the rupture in endless formation, rows upon rows of warships with blunt armored fronts, heavy gun batteries, missile spines, carrier bays, and engine flares bright as suns. Hundreds. Then thousands. Then more behind them. They did not scatter. They moved with terrifying order. At the center came a vessel so enormous it made Kras's flagship look like salvage metal. Its hull was scarred, practical, and built without beauty. Only purpose. Across its side, in bright white letters, were two words translated instantly across every channel. Two's resolve. Senna stepped into the ruined street as civilians emerged from hiding all around her. The people of Elyra looked up in stunned silence. The sky was no longer dark with invaders. It was filled with humanity. For one long moment, nobody moved. The Dravok fleet hung above Elyra in broken formation, caught between attack orders and instinctive fear. Their commanders had expected a few desperate freighters, maybe a token escort force. Instead, an ocean of steel had appeared from nowhere. On the bridge of his flagship, Warlord Kras forced himself upright. They are bluffing, he growled. No one answered. His officers stared at their screens. Enemy count still increasing. Additional contacts emerging behind primary line. Power signatures exceed known military standards. Kras snarled. Then we kill them before they deploy. He slammed his fist onto the command console. All batteries fire. Across orbit, Dravok cannons ignited. Green beams lanced upward. Missile swarms erupted from launch bays. Interceptor wings screamed forward and attack patterns drilled over centuries of raiding weaker prey. The first volley struck the Terran front line. And did almost nothing. Human shields flashed once like sunlight on water. Then stabilized. A few hull plates glowed red and cooled. No ships broke formation. No one retreated. The Terran armada kept advancing. Slowly. Confidently. As if the incoming fire were weather. Kras felt something unfamiliar crawl into his chest. Doubt. Then a new signal cut across every frequency in orbit. Clean, amplified, impossible to jam. A woman's voice. Calm. Controlled. Cold enough to freeze metal. Dravok Occupation Fleet. This is Admiral Mara Hayes of the Terran Unified Command. Every ship on both sides heard her. You are conducting unlawful aggression against a civilian world. Kras bared his teeth. Unlawful, he spat. The voice continued. You have one chance. Human ships rotated in unison, weapon ports opening like rows of dark eyes. Stand down. Release prisoners. Power down all weapons. A pause. Then. Or be removed. On the streets below, Elyrans looked at one another in disbelief. The Dravok had never been spoken to that way. Kras roared with rage. Fire everything. He snatched the channel open. You dare threaten me, little ape? His face appeared on wideband transmission, tusked and furious. This planet is mine. Its people are mine. Come take it. Across the Terran formation, no reply came for 3 full seconds. Then Admiral Hayes answered. Gladly. What happened next became legend. The human line accelerated. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Precise. Entire wings of destroyers surged outward, flanking the Dravok formation before enemy navigators could react. Carrier doors opened and Black Strike craft poured into space like released predators. Massive cruisers advanced straight through cannon fire, absorbing hits while their escorts moved undercover. Kras shouted fresh commands. Too late. He had fought victims all his life. Now he had found soldiers. Below, Senna watched the sky bloom with thousands of moving lights. The monsters who had laughed yesterday were screaming into radios today. And for the first time since the invasion began, the people of Elyra smiled. Then the humans opened fire. Not with the slow glowing beams the galaxy was used to. Not with warning shots. Not with ceremonial displays of force. With war. The front line of Terran destroyers released volleys of tungsten rail rounds accelerated to impossible speed. To eyes on the ground, they were invisible until impact, sudden flashes tearing through Dravok cruisers from bow to stern. One enemy ship split cleanly in half. Another spun burning into the atmosphere. Then came the missile waves. Thousands of them. Smart, fast, coordinated swarms that twisted through counterfire, selecting engines, bridges, weapons arrays, shield nodes. Explosions rolled across orbit like a storm chain. Kras's flagship fired broadside batteries in desperation. Green plasma struck the massive Terran battleship TUS Resolve dead center. Its armor flared white. Then held. The flagship did not even slow down. On its bridge, Admiral Mara Hayes stood with hands behind her back. Range? Main batteries locked. Ground casualties risk. Minimal with current vector. She nodded once. Fire. The nose of the Resolve opened. A column of blue-white energy lanced across space and punched through the Dravok flagship like paper. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the vessel detonated from the inside out. Armor plates, engine cores, command decks, everything erupted in a silent sphere of flame. On the streets below, burning fragments streaked across the sky like falling stars. Senna shielded her face from the light. People around her began cheering, crying, laughing all at once. The invincible flagship was gone. But the battle had only turned uglier for the invaders. Terran interceptors sliced through retreat lanes, forcing Dravok ships back into kill zones. Human cruisers moved in overlapping patterns, each covering the next, each strike calculated, disciplined, merciless. No wasted motion. No panic. No ego. This was not rage. It was practiced superiority. Dravok commanders screamed conflicting orders. Regroup. Retreat. Protect transports. Jump now. Many ships tried to flee. Human gravity nets activated. Blue spheres expanded across orbit, collapsing local jump space. Escape drives failed one after another. They were trapped. From hiding places across Elyra, civilians emerged into ruined streets to witness it. The fleet that had darkened their world only hours ago was now burning piece by piece. A boy beside Senna whispered, "Are they gods?" She shook her head slowly. No. Above them, another Dravok cruiser exploded. They're just the first people who came. And still more human ships kept arriving through the Terran space, row after row, until it no longer looked like a battle at all. It looked like the sky itself had chosen a side. While the war burned above, the rescue began below. Great box-shaped Terran dropships descended through smoke in controlled waves, engines roaring between shattered towers. They landed in plazas, streets, parks, even the remains of marketplaces, wherever survivors could be reached fastest. Their ramps slammed down. Human soldiers marched out. They were larger than Senna expected, wrapped in dark-powered armor scarred from old battles. Their helmets were smooth-faced visors with glowing blue optics. Medical packs hung beside rifles. Tools were mounted beside weapons. They looked like machines. Then the first one knelt beside an injured Elyran child. Its rifle magnetized to his back. Metal hands became gentle as he wrapped a pressure bandage around the child's arm. "Medic," he shouted. Another soldier sprinted over carrying supplies. So they were not machines. They were people inside monsters. Across the city, pockets of Dravok ground troops still fought viciously. One squad charged a group of civilians trying to reach a dropship. The lead Terran soldier stepped forward alone. "Get behind me." The civilians ducked. The Dravok fired point blank. Rounds struck the human chest plate and ricocheted away. He did not flinch. Then he raised his weapon. 3 deep thumps. 3 Dravok bodies hit the street. Another leaped with an energy blade. The human caught the wrist, twisted, and hurled the armored raider through a stone wall hard enough to crack it. Senna stared in shock. The stories of human aggression had not mentioned this part. They were terrifying. But only to the cruel. Near the old school district, Senna heard children crying and ran toward the sound. 3 young Elyrans were cornered beside a collapsed transport while 2 Dravok soldiers advanced on them. Before Senna could move, something dropped from the sky. A Terran trooper hit the street in a burst of dust, jetpack vents glowing. The Dravok fired wildly. Rounds bounced from his armor. He extended one gauntlet. A cone of flame erupted, forcing the raiders back screaming. They fled down the alley. The trooper turned to the children. His helmet speakers softened. "It's okay now." He crouched to their level and opened a pouch on his belt. Inside were ration bars, water packs, and wrapped squares of brown food. He handed one to the smallest child. She blinked. "What is it?" "Chocolate," he said. "Trust me." Even Senna laughed through tears. All around the city, humans did the same impossible combination. They fought like nightmares. They helped like neighbors. Medical tents rose in hours. Portable kitchens fed entire districts. Engineers restored clean water lines before sunset. Search teams crawled through rubble for strangers whose names they did not know. No one asked for payment. No one claimed territory. No flags were planted over Elyra's ruins. Only shelters. Only aid stations. Only lines of tired Terran soldiers carrying the wounded. Senna found the same trooper who had given the children chocolate. He was removing debris with 2 others, sweat running down his neck after lifting his helmet. "Why did you come?" she asked. He looked at her, surprised by the question. "Because you asked. The council said we were too small to matter." He glanced at the burning horizon, then back at her. "Back home, we have a rule." "What rule?" He smiled faintly. "No one stands alone." Above them, the last Dravok cruiser exploded in orbit. For the first time since the invasion began, night fell over Elyra without fear. By morning, the fires were under control. Smoke still rose from broken districts, and much of the capital lay in ruins, but the screams were gone. In their place came the sounds of rebuilding, cutting tools, transport engines, medical scanners, children talking again. The Dravok survivors had surrendered before dawn. Those who resisted were disarmed. Those who had commanded atrocities were placed in restraints and loaded onto prison carriers under heavy guard. The rest of their fleet was scrapped drifting above the planet. Elyra had been saved. But across the galaxy, something even larger had happened. Every world with senses had watched the battle. They had seen the mighty council do nothing. They had seen humanity cross impossible distance for strangers. They had seen the Dravok, feared for centuries, broken in a single night. And they had seen what came after. Not conquest. Not tribute. Not revenge. Relief ships. Hospitals. Food. On Orion Prime, the council hall was no longer full of confidence. It was full of silence. High Chancellor Elyran watched live feeds of Terran engineers repairing Elyran bridges. Human medics carried civilians. Human soldiers distributed water under burned statues. No one looted. No one demanded surrender treaties. No one asked permission. Marshal Terran, who had resigned the night before, stood at the rear of the chamber and said quietly, "They did in one day what this council failed to do in 1,000 speeches." No one argued. Back on Elyra, a temporary platform had been built in the central square from salvaged stone. Survivors gathered there beside Terran troops and rescue workers. Senna stood near the front. Admiral Mara Hayes stepped onto the stage wearing a simple dark uniform, not armor. She looked less like a conqueror than a tired teacher. Yet when she spoke, the whole square listened. "We did not come here to rule you." Her voice carried through speakers across the city. "We did not come for your land, your metals, or your loyalty." She looked over the damaged streets. "We came because help was needed." Many Elyrans began crying openly. Hayes continued. "There are powers in this galaxy who believe distance excuses indifference. Who believe small worlds can be sacrificed." She paused. "They are wrong." The Terran soldiers behind her stood silent and still. "From this day forward, let every tyrant understand something clearly." Her eyes lifted toward the sky. "If you attack the peaceful." 100 Terran ships ignited thrusters in orbit above. "You answer to Earth." The crowd erupted. Not in fear. In hope. Senna looked around at broken towers, tired survivors, human medics, children eating chocolate on repaired steps, and stars now guarded by ships that had asked nothing in return. Yesterday, Elyra had been forgotten. Today, it mattered. As the sun rose through clearing smoke, Senna held the old radio that had changed everything. One signal. One answer. One promise. No one stands alone. And across the galaxy, billions heard it.